So there's this debate that has been brewing in circles that probably the both of us are part of, right? Both in the Jewish community and perhaps the free speech libertarian community. And it's interesting. I've been interviewing really top thinkers, people you're probably familiar with, my namesake, David E. Bernstein, Randy Barnett, Eugene Volokh, Nadine Strawson, and the like. These are very thoughtful people about this. And the question I keep on posing to them is this. It seems like there's some tension, at least, between free speech, whether you talk about it explicitly only in a legal sense or also in terms of a culture of free speech, and equal protection. In other words, you could argue that, okay, these universities haven't practiced free speech. They're not going to practice free speech. They have all these microaggression policies in place in which they use to stifle free speech. So under such conditions, they have to apply the law and their own regulations and rules equally, or else they're in violation of the equal protection of Jewish students. There's another school of thought, and I think Eugene Volokh summarized it very well. He says, I don't want equal protection of repression. In other words, he's not willing to live with that option of universities stifling free speech of anybody, and he's going to really stick to his guns with freedom of expression with free speech. Where do you fall on that?
First, whenever we see extreme anti-Jewish speech on campuses, we almost always see anti-Jewish conduct as well. Usually conduct of a sort that everyone would agree is conduct. I mean, it just is usually the case that people might come to us because they've heard bad things, insulting, offensive things said about Jews, and they've heard it and they can quote it, and it's been quoted in the blogosphere or the media. But if you really ask them, okay, what's going on there? The real problem with this hate speech is that it really does lead to hate conduct and hate crimes. You find that there are the conduct and incidents as well, and then you can focus on the conduct and the incidents. But beyond that, I don't think that public institutions should be choosing between free speech and equal protection. That's not an option given to them by the Constitution, and they shouldn't put themselves above the Constitution. They really need to provide both. There may be times where hostile environments have been created out of speech in the anti-Semitic context, just as there are certainly in the sexual harassment context. But in those situations, if you cannot find other instances as well, if it turns out that you are dealing only with constitutionally protected expression, the institution nevertheless has an obligation to address the situation in what's called a non-regulatory way. That is to say, to develop training, orientation, processes, procedures, support services for targeted groups. There are a whole wide array of options available for institutions to take actions even when offensive activity takes the form of purely protected activity. Again, most of the time where there's offensive speech, there's also offensive conduct, and they should deal with the conduct. But if there isn't offensive conduct, if it's just speech, there are things that can be done by the institution that would be entirely consistent with the First Amendment, even as interpreted by Eugene Volokh.
Such as, what would you want the university to do in those situations?
My former agency, the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights, or OCR, provided guidance in 2010 that made the point. First, they confirmed my prior policy that Jews are protected under Title VI. That's something that I had established almost exactly 20 years ago.
Thank you, by the way. Really.
I appreciate that. So in 2010, the Obama administration ratified that, but also gave it some detail. And they made the point that even if an institution is taking disciplinary action against a perpetrator, that may not be enough, because if the environment has been made toxic by activities that can harm more than just the targeted individual, punishment is enough. Other things have to be done, and OCR listed a whole number of different things that can be done in terms of making clear its values, its policies, its procedures, investigating the situation, monitoring it, so on and so forth. There is no shortage of things that can be done by the institution, whether they are using their disciplinary procedures or not.
Thank you for tuning in to The Contrarian. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to rate our podcast on Apple and Spotify. Stay connected with us on social media for more updates. Until next time, keep challenging.